people today. They could spend half their lives over 50. That's a lot of living. So it helps to have a wise friend and fierce defender in your corner. A friend like AARP. So your health lives longer.
This is just slow-mo karate?
Just slow-mo karate.
Your money lives longer.
I just bought that.
I just sold that.
And your happiness lives longer. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Join today.
Welcome to AARP Illinois' virtual event. It's so wonderful to have you with us. AARP is on a mission to connect with individuals across various communities, especially those aged 50 and above. We're here to listen, understand, and address the unique needs of you and your community as we age. Our goal is to enrich your experience by expanding our local activities, providing opportunities for you to discover and engage with all that life has to offer right here in your own community and virtually. As we journey through today's event, we invite you to consider joining our dedicated team of AARP volunteers. It's a chance to make a meaningful impact and help us better serve those 50 plus across the nation. Connect with us and be a part of this vibrant movement toward positive change. Welcome, and let's make this event both fun and transformative.
Hello, thanks for joining us today for this virtual conversation. We are here in Godfrey, Illinois with record store owner Billy Hurst. RiverBend Records is the name of his store, and we're going to have a deep conversation with him about his store and about vinyl records in general. Thank you for letting us be here today, Billy. Today's conversation is a part of AARP's mission to empower people to choose how they live as they age. Again, appreciate you having us in your beautiful store.
Absolutely.
Let's jump right in. I do have
Sure.
my first question. Just tell us about, I guess, why you love vinyl and what was your journey to opening this store?
I mean, it all really started as a kid, just digging through my parents' record collection. I was one of those kids that just loved music, lived music, and luckily I had a great set of parents that encouraged me to play the records, don't touch the records. They taught me how to play the records, how to put the record on the spindle, on the turntable, and then when you're finished, put it back in the sleeve, and not just leave it around. So they taught me proper care, but how to appreciate not only the music but the format. When vinyl went away in the in the 90s, and when everybody was buying CDs, myself included, I still collected records, and that's how I built the majority of my collection. Was when everybody was getting rid of their records, I was kind of digging through boxes in dark, dank record stores, and when people were buying CDs and everything, I was buying CDs and records, but I was buying records for nothing,
Right.
4, 5, 6 for $1, and pretty much built my collection on that, not ever thinking that it was going to be an investment down the line. It's just, I love the format. I love the music. Moved down the road, joined the workforce, started doing things. The stock market crash, everything in 2008 kind of led me to a career change. I was a musician, artist, moved back home and started working construction, and did that for 6.5 years. And then all of a sudden the market, the housing market crashed, and had to find something else to do. So I became a professional photographer, and that led to my real job today. Is I'm a professional photographer for the St. Louis Cardinals. I'm a team photographer for the Cardinals, but this came out of necessity, because while I am the photographer of the Cardinals, I also am, or was, a youth sports photographer. So I shot all the youth sports from T-ball to college, and pro even. And we started that around 2010. Had a business called Front Row Photo here locally. And when COVID hit, we had to find something else to do, because there was no sports. There's no youth sports in the area. And you can't sit home for a year and not do anything and not draw any kind of a paycheck. So I had the discussion with my wife. The record store was always going to be, because I've always loved records. It's always was a plan, a long-term plan for us and for myself as a retirement plan. But it was kind of kicked into high gear, and out of necessity during COVID, this place became available. I would
Yeah.
have never in a million years thought this location would be available. It was Black Sporting Goods for 40 years previous, you know. Of course, COVID negatively affected their
Right.
business as well. So unfortunately, they closed. We saw the location was available, came in and were able to work out a deal. And you know, like I said, it was definitely going to be something I was going to do down the line, but never this magnitude, never
Right.
this big. But you know, out of necessity, it worked, and RiverBend Records was born.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's where we're at today.
This is a beautiful store.
Thank you.
You know, I enjoy coming into
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
So, in today's digital age, what draws people, I guess, back to vinyl? I guess especially older adults.
Well, a lot of it is just nostalgia.
Yeah,
You
right,
know, as with anything, whether it be baseball cards or video games or movies, it's nostalgia. I think you want to recapture a little bit of your youth, and this is one of the best ways to do it because the music never changes. Funny thing about music is you can hear a song, and you can a lot of times take you immediately back.
Right.
You'll remember the first time you heard that song.
Yep.
Maybe it reminds you of, you know, your time you spent with your parents, or maybe your first girlfriend, or you know, your buddies at your first concert. There's so many different memories associated with music, and I don't think anything positively affects you like that does.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it is just nostalgia.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all go. It's kind of like the smell. You smell something and you remember it.
Right.
You hear something, you definitely go back.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess what artists and genres, I can guess maybe for older adults what is popular to them, but are you seeing them going towards what they listened to in high school, or are you seeing them branching out and maybe going into new stuff?
I guess it really comes down to what you define as old. I mean, we're probably around the same age. I mean, I'm approaching 50, you know, and you know, I feel old sometimes, but then some days I'm like, no, I fight it right up till the end. But no, I mean, guys of our age, I would say the popular acts are easy to choose. Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Kiss, Leonard Skinner, you know, and even on the other side of the coin, Michael Jackson, Prince, you know, Madonna. Those acts that we grew up with, those are very, very popular. And then for the next, you know, the older generation, the generation before us, I would say obviously the Beatles. The Beatles are still huge. Elvis, the Rolling Stones, you know, which, you know, they're still making music.
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And at the younger generation, like I would say probably I wouldn't say the majority of our business, but a significant majority of our customers are 17 to 35.
Really?
It's unbelievable to see these kids coming in. Of course, they're just building their collection.
Sure.
A lot of guys my age or older, we're just supplementing our collection. Where maybe we're upgrading, we're replacing old copies. These kids are building a collection from scratch. A lot of these kids have never had physical format music. You know, they've grown up with their iPhones or their iPads and haven't really ever held and read liner notes and credits like we did when we were kids. So yeah, they're building music of not only their generation, but I love seeing them come to the counter with Boston and Journey and Elton John and Fleetwood Mac. The kids love Fleetwood Mac. I mean, I can't keep Fleetwood Mac. Yeah.
That's really cool because not only, I guess, selfishly, this will make sure that, because I love collect, you know, that this will continue for many, many decades to come.
Right.
Like,
no, they're definitely going to keep it going for sure. I don't, you know, you'll get people that'll say, "Oh, it's a fad. It's coming and going. It's just what the kids are into now. These kids can't keep focused on anything." And I said the same thing about us. You know, every generation has its doubters. But no, these kids are. You know, I think we're in good hands.
That's awesome. That's exciting to hear. Share a story with us when you saw somebody come in and your record store helped them reconnect with, I guess, with a memory or a person or something like that. Yeah,
it honestly, it happens quite a lot. Just last week, there were a couple ladies, I'd say maybe a little older than me, that were just walking around. They had never been in the store before. They weren't necessarily what I would call vinyl buyers, vinyl shoppers. They were just, oh, I haven't been in a record store in 30 years, you know, this is awesome. And so they kind of looked around, they went in, they actually grabbed a couple CDs because we do sell, in addition to vinyl, we sell CDs and cassettes. And So we have a pretty vast selection of CDs in the back room. They were back there. They came back out with a couple CDs, and right at the front, we had just literally put out our Christmas selection of CDs, but then we have some records right up towards the front. And I don't know why, but for some reason, it caught the eye of one of these ladies, and she literally grabbed her sister, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, look at what is here." And it was, there were two actually. There was a Bing Crosby Christmas and a Johnny Mathis Christmas that they both, like I said, I don't think they may not even have a record player, but they bought these records because it immediately, I mean, the one lady had tears in her eyes because, and she's like, "I remember Mom cooking all the time, and we had these records going." And it gets you emotional just even talking about it, because we've all got those connections and those memories. And that we see it all the time. And that just happened to be the most recent.
That's fun. Yeah. I'm fortunately in possession of my parents' Christmas albums, and it's a joy. Now my kids are listening to them, so it's awesome. I
just always remember from Thanksgiving to New Year's, it's like you knew it was Christmas time because Mom would put the decorations up and the Christmas records would be playing.
Absolutely. So I guess we kind of talked about this a little bit. How has vinyl impacted the different generations interacting with each other?
It's a good question, and I have to think about that a little bit. I think, like you said, we had just kind of briefly touched on it with the younger generation, probably never experiencing a physical format of music. We are of the age to where, at least I am of the age to where I kind of experienced every physical format of music, starting with 8 tracks with me. That was really where I fell in love with music, because I had a little robot 8-track player I got when I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and it played these little Marvel comic book trivia tapes. And you would ask questions, you'd punch the program 1, 2, 3, 4 for the answer. But then I also played my Charlie Daniels and Little Richard tapes, and my dad's Beach Boys tapes and whatever on there. So I grew up with 8 tracks, and then LPs, and then cassettes, and then CDs, and then of course, oh wow, I can get all these songs on my phone. So I've had them all. I've experienced them all, and there's been positives and negatives to every one. But I think the kids, unfortunately, my kids are 25 and 23. Other than maybe me burning them a couple CDs to go to bed to or whatever, they really never experienced. They never went out and bought CDs. Everything they've ever had has been on a phone or an iPad or a computer. And it's just not the same. I get the convenience of it, but it is just not the same. And so when these kids are seeing it for the first time, when they're able to come in and pick up a record and look, wow, what is this big giant CD? And then they get their first record player, or maybe they've got a hand down record player from their mom or dad or aunt or uncle or grandma or grandpa. They're really falling in love with it. And I think that's from their perspective, it's really cool, but it's also kind of impacted the older generation, myself, and even older than myself, because now we're able to interact with sometimes 2 generations and 3 generations spanning at the same time at a record store. It's pretty cool, because some of the younger kids, like I said, they're buying Elvis. A lot of it has to do with the movies, the Queen movie, the Elvis movie, the Elton John movie. Those were super popular and very impactful. I mean, the power of those movies driving the sales and popularity of these artists is not to be taken lightly. It really does. And then, then the older generation comes in and they're like, who's Greta Van Fleet? And it's like, oh, you like Led Zeppelin? And like, well, of course I like Led Zeppelin, and you should listen to these guys. And this is Led Zeppelin 2.0.
And you'd never know until. Well, and I've always thought, record collecting is an experience, from going in to buy it, to listening to it, to holding it. It's just a big experience.
It really is.
You don't get that when you press 3 buttons and listen to whatever song you absolutely want to.
No, totally. And from an artist's perspective, you're ingesting the music and the album and the art that they created the way they intended you to hear it. They didn't record that or intend it to be heard one single at a time, one song at a time, skip around to track 8 and never hear tracks 1 through 7. A lot of these guys put a lot of thought into how those went together. Now, once streaming became and digital downloads became more important to record labels because they saw that was the wave of the future at the time, say 20 years ago. Albums and the creation of the art became secondary to the creation of the single. Unfortunately, NSYNC and Britney Spears and acts like that. Nothing against them; they're super popular and they're super relevant. But they were never album artists. They were created to sell singles,
right?
And that's what they did,
right?
I mean, their singles. You just look at the charts. Their singles by far outsold any of their albums.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. This kind of goes into, I guess, what we've been talking about too. This is, I don't know what the hardest part about owning a record store is, but
there's a lot of them.
Well, I'm sure. How do you make sure that and you have I have thousands of records in here. How do you make sure that appeals to all your store customers?
A lot of it's just, having conversations
Yeah.
with the customers that come through, whether it be the 17 to 35-year-old or the 70-year-old, that's been collecting records since before I was born. Familiarizing yourself with what they like, what has been popular, what is popular, and what will always be popular is kind of the way I look at it, and you can't understand that unless you really listen and you open yourself up objectively to experience new stuff that might not be your cup of tea. And I'll tell you, with age, I have really kind of lightened my stance on, because I would dig my heels in the ground. As a kid, I was heavy metal and hard rock all the way. I believed I hated country music, and mom and dad played it all the time. I didn't want to hear any of that stuff. And then all it took was an artist named Garth Brooks in 1989 to change my perspective on that. And then I went back, and of course, country music exploded in the 90s with artists like Garth Brooks and Travis Tritt, Clint Black, Alan Jackson, and so on and so forth. But I went back, not only did I love those guys, but I went back and fell in love with George Strait and Hank Williams Jr. and Merle Haggard and George Jones and Waylon Jennings. So yeah, you've got to be open to listening to stuff that maybe you once thought you hated, because trust me, your ear and your taste change. Just like even taste. Like you may not have ever liked sushi,
right?
But you get to an age where if you give it a try, you'd be like, what have I been missing out on all my life? So yeah, just being open to change and new things.
Right.
You're not going to always like everything,
right?
At least giving it a fair shake.
Right, and having a plethora of different options for folks is
obviously
very important.
Basically, like now with the kids, we keep going back to the kids. They have like the Spotify. Like if they like Greta Van Fleet, well, if you like this, then you might like this.
Right.
Just talking to people in here, that we're our own Spotify.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Have you ever heard of this band?
Right.
Who are these guys? And we get a lot of that. Like we'll play stuff, and coming into a record store is unlike anything else, especially if you're a music fan and you're getting into it. The experience of being in a shop, I can't tell you how many people buy things just because it's playing over the speakers.
Yeah.
What is this? Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the new Silk Sonic, Bruno Mars.
Right.
Yeah.
Listen to something that you would never put on, but
it
opens your mind up a little bit.
100%.
Now, this is, I want to know, how do you think modern technology is playing a role in the vinyl experience today?
Oh, my goodness. The perfect example, I can think of two off the top of my head. And one is, we mentioned earlier the Rolling Stones. God bless them, 80 years old, still out there making new music. We're fortunate to have these guys here still. Unfortunately, we only have 2 of the 4 Beatles remaining. But I'm not sure if you heard, but a few weeks ago we got a new Beatles song.
Yeah.
And that's all due to technology. Artificial intelligence was able to get it. So I think it was like the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. Yoko was digging through some tapes, and she found what we understand to be the last song that John ever wrote.
Oh, wow. On
a cassette tape. And it's basically a very archaic, boombox setting on a piano, and John's playing and singing, and it's all on one cassette tape that's now 30 years old. Well, it's been unearthed 30 years ago, but it's probably well over 50 years old at this point. And so she gives it to George and Paul and Ringo at the time and says, let's see if we can do something with it. And they just didn't have the technology to get everything. They were able to get 1 or 2 songs worked out of it, but this one particular song couldn't do anything because the piano was kind of muddying up the vocal and everything else. So now with artificial intelligence, the AI technology that Peter Jackson, Lord of the Rings, had actually had a hand in developing, they were able to go in and get, strip and remove and use the AI to actually separate John's vocal and the piano. And then George, who had recorded a track, George has been gone now for a handful of years, but he had tried laying down a guitar track. They were able to get his track, and then Paul and Ringo came in, and they were able to actually have the last true recorded Beatles record, thanks to technology.
Right.
That's the that's the mind blower to me.
Right.
I still can't wrap my head around that. And then secondly is the advent of a new technology. It's been around a little while, but it's a DSD. It's direct stream digital. It's the highest lossless form of digital capture you can have. So essentially, what they're able to do, and in this group here, Mobile Fidelity, they're a label. They're an audiophile label. So what they do is they produce records of the highest audio quality. They're a little bit more expensive. This particular record runs about $100. But what they've done is they've taken a record that we're all extremely familiar with, came out in 1978, Van Halen's debut album. They have captured it on direct stream digital and are able to go in and manipulate it to the finite degree.
Right.
I mean, just amazing things they're able to do with the sound quality. And with a tape, a master tape, it has a finite amount of plays to it. Whether it's being played or whether it's just being stored, it's only going to be good for a certain amount of time. Oxidation will hurt it. So many different things can hurt it. And so from the first time it's played till the last time it's played, it degrades every time.
Right.
Well, with this DSD lossless digital, they're able to capture it. Mobile Fidelity comes in with a tape machine, and they're able to play off the original master tapes, capture this lossless audio, and then go in, take it back to their place in California, and just get in there and just make it as good as it has ever been. And then they have the technology to press it where it sounds like literally better than you've ever heard it sound before. I mean, you put it on and the sound stage is just so broad. I mean, you're hearing things. We've lived with this record since 1978.
Right.
And when I heard it for the first time, I was like, holy cow. It's literally like hearing it for the first time again.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Now, do you have to have a special record player for
No.
Okay.
These actually will play on any 33 and a third. This is not some of them are cut at 45 RPM, which is a little bit the higher it turns, the better it will sound.
Oh, okay.
So it'll play on any 33 or 45 turntable.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You don't have to go buy a bunch of new
No.
equipment. Yeah.
Like I said though, they are pretty expensive. They're pressed on
on the front end.
Finest quality vinyl that is around. It's a super vinyl, something that they have put out. I mean, it's the purest form of vinyl, no additives, no injections, no color. It's actually crystal clear, which vinyl is. Most people don't know that.
No.
The black is a dye that's added to the vinyl. That pure vinyl is clear.
Yeah.
That's
interesting.
Yep.
I guess tell us what your advice would be to somebody, and we've talked about both categories, someone who's just coming in to record collection or someone who's just restarting where they ended up 30 years ago.
Right.
What advice would you give to them?
I mean, probably first and foremost, make sure you've got a decent turntable to play your records on. You don't have to break the bank and because they make turntables that are $5,000 or more, but I'd say, get a decent turntable, and we sell them all day long. Our most popular turntable is like a $200 turntable. And it's I call it old school. You can hook it up the old school way with the RCA cables or audio cables. Or what's cool now is they have Bluetooth technology. And we were talking about earlier about the advancements in technology. This is one thing that I forgot to mention, but the new turntables, you can just set them down. You don't have to have wires running all through the house. Bluetooth it to any powered speaker or even a sound bar that everybody's got a sound bar in their house, right? And they sound fantastic. I say get yourself a good turntable because your listening experience is going to be so much better and much more pleasurable and enjoyable than on a $50 suitcase
Right.
type player. Not that there's anything, there's a lot wrong with them, but if you're given to it, maybe it's all you could afford at the time.
Right.
Eventually you want to upgrade and get something, a decent turntable. That's going to be first and foremost. And, speakers are kind of a secondary thing, but I would say definitely get a decent turntable. And then, check your local record stores for pre-owned copies. Every day we have people coming in here wanting to get rid of their records. So we've got good, affordable pre-owned copies of probably a lot of the stuff that they would like, because, with anything new, it's going to be a little bit more pricey, and it's exactly the same.
Yeah.
However, if there's certain bands that you're into, whether you're rebuilding a collection, if you're a little bit older, or maybe you're just starting a collection for the younger people, don't be afraid to look at the newer reissues, because they're affordable, especially if you say you're into a band like heavy metal, let's say Metallica, Iron Maiden. Those originals of those things are quite pricey, because there's certain genres, metal, punk, and jazz especially, that people just don't get rid of those records. They keep them. They buy them and they stay with them until they're gone. So finding originals of any of those three genres that can become quite pricey. Don't be afraid to look into the brand new pressings. They're affordable, they're available, and they sound good.
Right.
Especially if you're a jazz fan. The original records they were kind of pressed archaically. They were inserted in these cardboard sleeves with no inner sleeves. So even a brand new one that you would get could be scuffed up, or they weren't pressed on the highest of quality vinyl. And they're going to be expensive. You find a really nice old jazz piece, they are very expensive. So they can be. Some of them can be. You get into your John Coltrane and your Miles Davis, Grant Green, things like that. They'll cost you a pretty penny. But there are a handful of great labels out there right now that are making records. There's no better time than to be a jazz fan, especially if you're of our age. A lot of people are just kind of dipping their toes into jazz, because it's accessible to them now. And like I said, there's a lot of labels out there that are making great jazz titles, some of the top jazz titles that have ever been recorded, and you can get them for $30 a brand new great sounding copy. You couldn't even look at one for $30, let alone, you just can't find them. They're just not out there.
So that's interesting. You said what you said. So they've made records in the past and didn't have a sleeve. They just threw them. I didn't know. I get those, and I'm like, well, maybe the sleeve's gone or something.
I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, it was just, nobody looked at records as ever being a collectible,
right?
And some people still don't. But the reality is, you want to take care of it and preserve it, to the best you can, the best of your ability. And an inner sleeve, whether it's even a paper inner sleeve, or a lot of the higher end collectors and audiophiles will ditch that paper inner sleeve immediately, because it causes, not only are you getting paper dust and fragments on the record, but it's causing scuffing and scratching. But worse yet, even static. Static will be one of your worst enemies when you're listening to records. It causes it's the invisible pop and click.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you see scratches and dust and things on a record. You understand why it's poppy and clicking. But the static is invisible, and it causes much more pop and click than you'll ever know. So you get it cleaned, and then you put it in an anti-static inner sleeve, or rice paper lined inner sleeve, and that'll only not protect your record from static, but from scratches and paper dust.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Huh. I never knew that.
Oh, there's so many levels of
that's
this,
crazy.
Yeah.
Give us your advice. So let's say, and many people are watching this, will have had a loved one who passed away, or maybe their family's downsizing or something, so they're now in the possession of a new collection of records. What's your advice for them?
Well, first and foremost, hopefully they were close enough with the person that has just passed that maybe they know a little bit something about them. Maybe they spent some time with them and their record collection. So it means more than just things that have been, oh, great, now I'm left with all this stuff. And unfortunately, we see that a lot. But I would like to hope that those records mean something to them, and they've already gone through them and maybe kept a couple that were sentimental for whatever reason. They've kept that. And then because you can learn a lot about a person, not only through just talking to them, but really digging into their record collection. You know, that can be a big impact and a big influence on a young person, you know, that maybe just lost somebody. You can really feel like you're going to connect with them. But I think more to answer your question, if a lot of people feel like they've been burdened with a lot of stuff. I lost my mom 3 years ago, and while it never felt like a burden, it's unbelievable how much a person can accumulate over a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you end up getting rid of this, getting rid of that, whether you're reaching out to family members to see, hey, does anybody like this? Because, and I would suggest, you know, doing that if you've got records. Obviously, I want to make. I mean, I'm a businessman, and I would love to see them come through the door, and I would love to buy them all. Unfortunately, I can't, because some of the things I just can't use. And in reality, I would love to see them in the hands of somebody that would appreciate them, and maybe they've got a connection with them. So reach out to other existing family members. Maybe they had that connection that you don't know about with your mom or your dad or whoever has just passed. They may have spent a lot of time sitting in the garage drinking some, you know, some beverages and listening to these records back in the day. And they're like, man, I'd love to have one or two of these records. So we get that a lot. Even when people do come in with collections, they're like, yeah, because my first question is, has somebody already cherry picked all the good stuff out here? Right. Like, well, no, you know, Cousin Joe came over and grabbed a couple that were he liked. But then once you're past that and you're ready to, you know, you don't want them, you don't have any need, your kids don't have any need, then you just really want to rid yourself of these. Then I would say a place like us would be the first place I would stop, because we will go through and evaluate what you have, honestly, give you an honest breakdown and evaluation, because like I said, not everything is a sellable item. And old doesn't always mean valuable. That's the one thing that a lot of people tend to misconstrue, is that, oh man, these records are extremely old. Right. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the extremely old ones, you know, from especially the 40s, 50s, and early 60s, everybody had the same thing because it was their entertainment. We see it a lot. We're just now getting into the era of the people that are passing now, which would be either they're not necessarily, you don't have to pass, maybe they're just downsizing. They're tired of hauling these records around for 30, 40, 50 years. Maybe they're moving into an assisted living facility, or the unfortunate situation of somebody passing. I mean, it is life. It happens. That's where we'll end up seeing a lot of these things roll through. And like I said, we're just seeing the first wave of, you know, people in their 70s now, even 80s, that had things that a lot of people are now finding a little bit more desirable. It's not all the 60s soundtracks, you know, South Pacific and
Dr. Zhivago.
And Dr. Zhivago, and then the Ray Conniff and Andy Williams and Al Hurt.
Well, good music.
It's good music, nothing against it, but a lot of that Dixieland swing, big band era, my goodness, we've just been in today. I've got a back room full of it. I bet. But we're just now starting to see that first wave of Stones and Beatles and things like that. The people that collected that first wave of rock and roll, which is going to be interesting. You know, if you're a record collector, there hopefully we'll see more of that. You know, and less of the. And nothing against it, but it's just,
every time I come in here, we talk about '90s country, and you just, like you always tell me, it just doesn't come through the doors.
It doesn't. Well, number one, it wasn't. Not a lot of it was pressed.
Correct. And because that was kind of during the transition time.
Absolutely. I mean, Garth had a couple, I think his first 2 or 3, but they were record club only. And that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. You couldn't go in the store and buy those records. They were through like Record Club, you know, the Columbia, you know, Columbia House, BMG. Well, we all know how many CDs have we all ordered from
college.
Columbia
That's
House.
exactly.
And our collections were built on that stuff. But Grandma was still sitting at home, believe it or not, ordering her records through Columbia House while we were ordering CDs.
I never even thought about that. That's crazy. All right, I'm going to do the last question here and wrap up today. This has been fantastic. I've enjoyed this thoroughly. Give us a cool story of when you've had a record in here. It doesn't have to be the most expensive record in the world. That just created buzz for whatever reason.
So it's crazy. We've been here a little over 3 years, not quite 3.5 years here. And I guess during our grand opening, somebody saw whether it was through our advertising or on Facebook or whatever, saw that they were local here. They lived up in Elsa, and they saw that we were opening, and they reached out to their aunt in Florida. And she said, Aunt so-and-so, I won't throw her name out there, but she's like, hey, I think I found a place for Uncle so-and-so's record collection. She had been trying to sell this record collection. He had passed 9 years previous, so it'd been 12 years now. And it took her some time to get to the point and it takes a lot of people time, so you can't just always go right in and get it out, It takes time to process it. And this was a massive collection. It was over 25,000 pieces.
Whoa.
Yes. And so 2 problems there. It's extremely large and it's in Florida.
Right. But
the lady called. We've had several conversations over the phone. She had an actual list. This guy was meticulous about, he had an index card system, a file system of every record in his collection. Wow. So she sent me some videos, and he knew he was passing, so he sat down with her and told her, this is what I've built and what I had acquired over 30 plus years of collecting. These records that have these certain orange stickers on them are what he felt were collectible records. Here you go. And he left her with this, and it was kind of her money to travel on, or kind of start a retirement on, I guess. And so she reached out to a bunch of places in the Orlando area, and they were obviously interested because this guy had put together a pretty immaculate collection. But she wasn't getting the offers that she felt like were fair, and they wanted to come in and cherry pick. Nobody had the capacity or the capability to take on a 25,000 piece collection. It's a lot. In hindsight, I may have been a little bit crazy taking it on, but I had a friend in Orlando that went down. He did me a solid. She agreed to let him come in, and he spent like 6 or 8 hours just going through the collection, sending me pictures, and we communicated the whole time. And he's like, yes, I think this is worth you taking the time, making a trip to come down here and lay eyes on. Wow. So I told you, I work for the Cardinals, so I would go down every spring training. So I went down a few days early, one particular spring training, and he and I and another friend met up, and we spent a whole day at her place and went through everything and realized it was a collection worth really seriously making an offer, sitting down and talking with her. And she was here and I was here, and we ultimately met here.
Got there, right?
And got it done. It took us about a year, maybe a little over a year, to get the deal done. But just imagine going through 25,000 records, and we needed the inventory. We have a big space to fill, so that was one of the reasons I took it on. But the other reason was he was from the area. She wanted his records to come back home, so to speak. Right. And so she felt happy about it. I felt happy about it. We packed everything up, and what we did when we went through, because obviously he had what he felt as a desirable collectible record. 30 years ago,
is really good, right?
Well, the hobby has changed in 30 years. 30 years ago, there were several Frank Sinatra records and Buddy Holly records and Richie Valens records that were, and Julie London and on and on and on, that were collectible and still are to a degree, but not near what they were. But then on the other hand, there were records that were nothing 30 years ago that he just had in boxes that are now pretty highly sought after. So we had to get in there and lay hands on it in a quick fashion. We didn't want to spend 3 days here. In one day, we not only packed everything up, but we were sorting everything. This is the A boxes. These are the better things. These are B boxes and C boxes. Loaded them on a U-Haul, brought them back.
Oh, wow.
So we obviously couldn't go over everything with a fine-tooth comb. But the long way around to answer your question, we found a record. It was a David Bowie record, Hunky Dory, an original from like 71, which in and of itself is pretty dang cool.
Sure.
It was a really nice first pressing, and we're going through cleaning everything, pricing everything, and I look on the back, and I'm kind of just investigating. I'm like, this is signed.
Oh, wow.
This is signed. And, David had just passed a couple years prior, and I'm like, you have to be kidding me. And so I looked up what signatures, looked like, and so we matched the signature. I had a couple other people come over like, that is actually signed.
Wow.
And it was dated. David Bowie, he signed it in 74. And so that was extremely cool to find that in a collection that we never even knew.
Right.
But we put it out, and I think it maybe lasted a day or a day and a half. But that was a really cool one. And then, we've had these records sitting here the whole interview. And this is another one that was in that collection. This is the very first Bob Dylan record. Not only, what makes it extremely special is not only is it the very first Bob Dylan record, it's the very first promotional copy that they sent out to radio stations and
cool.
DJs. So imagine being a DJ in, say, 1962, and this record comes across your desk, and it's like, who the heck is this Bob Dylan guy? It says right here, a new star on Columbia Records. And so that is kind of cool. It is a very valuable record, especially in the condition it's in, but it's a conversation piece.
Right,
and we've got it priced a little higher because it's one of those things like, this is my I don't want to sell it price.
Right,
we all have that on certain things. And so I've had this up behind the counter since we've opened, or since we actually got the collection from Florida.
Gotcha.
Which we knew this was in there. There were a couple really nice early promo Dylan pieces in there. The other ones have sold. This one hasn't yet. But it's such a great conversation piece, because people will be like, what is that? And when you tell them, they're like, that's pretty awesome.
He looks like he's 15 there.
Exactly. We're fortunate enough to, like I said, still have him out making music.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Well, hey, I really appreciate your insights, your awesome stories, and letting us be in your unique store here.
Yeah. No, thank you for coming in. I appreciate you guys coming in.
This is fantastic. Again, Godfrey, Illinois. We're with Billy Hurst, the owner. Very nice guy. If you ever get down this way, come in and talk to him. He'll be happy to help you. RiverBend Records is the name. This is Jeff Scott. I appreciate everybody viewing us today. If you want to see what's coming up, go to aarp.org/il. You'll see what virtual events we're going to have in the future. I hope you enjoyed this one.